and get ready to zoom back in for Alabama, heading over to Athens, Georgia to take on Kirby Smart's Bulldogs. Again, before we start, let us know who you got. Tell us why, maybe. Number 14, Alabama. Again, on the road, they are 2-1. Taking on number 2, Georgia, who are 3-0 with already a conference win under their belt against Tennessee. Georgia goes into this game minus 3-point favorites, as it's the 75th meeting between the two. The last two seasons have been a very entertaining matchup against each other. 2024, it was a 41-34 win for the Tide there in Tuscaloosa. And then in 2023, they didn't play each other in the regular season. It ended up being a meeting for the SEC title, where also Bama won 27-24. Kalen DeBoer, head coach for Alabama, last week had a bye, just like Georgia. But the week before, they beat Wisconsin 38-14. The defense doing an excellent job. And if I'm not mistaken, those 14 points came later in the game when the second teams were out. At least one of those touchdowns. 31-17 loss to Florida State in week 1. That's kind of plague them and be a big old cloud over their head for the rest of the season. Kirby Smart, again, had a bye last week, but had a massive win in Knoxville. 44-41 overtime dub against the Tennessee Volunteers. The big question, massive question to ask in this one. Is Alabama going to be able to run the ball? So far, the Tide are 87th in the country with their run offense, averaging 123.7 yards per game. They will come up against Georgia's 23rd ranked run defense, and they're averaging 101.5 yards given up per game. I guess maybe going to more of a legitimate opponent, Alabama, and why I bring up this question is that they only got 87 yards on the ground against Florida State, who was a very physical team with the Tide there in week 1. And I guess Georgia's toughest opponent, pretty recent, that was Tennessee. And the only team I believe to also get over 100 yards, and why it's at 101.5. The Volunteers got 125 yards on the ground. I think another thing to mention and why it's very important to run the ball for the Tide is that you don't want to give a lot of pressure onto Ty Simpson, who's somewhat gaining confidence. You know, the 73-0 win over UL Monroe, building onto that the next week after, 38-14 over the Badgers, visiting there in Tuscaloosa. You don't want him to feel the pressure. He got sacked 3 times against Florida State. So that's kind of a sign if Alabama can't run the ball, well, they're probably going to have another tough time in protecting him. As I would say, this Bama line is more built for the run versus protecting him there in the pocket. But you guys, I think I was wrong about Gunnar Stockton, especially against Tennessee. We were kind of a little bit down on him, on what we, again, were expecting against the Volunteers. He went 23 for 31, 74.5 pass completion rate. That was pretty disgusting there on the road in Knoxville. With 304 yards passing as well. That was an eyebrow raiser, especially with what we have seen so far in the beginning of the season for him. 2 passing touchdowns. We saw one of those in the top 10 plays for week 3. And then one of those going as far as 45 yards. So he's sometimes gonna risk it for the biscuit. Was also sacked 4 times. That's a thing we need to bring up. Tennessee's front end of their defense, very good in putting pressure on the pocket. But another big, beautiful stat Nice goose egg in the interception column against that top 25 opponent. He also had 13 carries for 38 yards on the ground with 1 rushing touchdown. We should expect him to also use his legs against Alabama this upcoming weekend. But another thing to mention here, Alabama has a top 5 pass defense. They are 3rd in the nation with giving up 108 yards through the air. The kind of only reason why it's in the triple digits is because of the game against Florida State, which was another eyebrow raiser. Florida State only had 152 yards. So that is a sign that Gunnar Stockton really doesn't need to be that crazy with that stat. He just needs to be efficient, which he was against Tennessee with a 74.5, again, pass completion rate. If he can be ready there in key moments to deliver for the Bulldogs, Georgia has a hell of a chance in winning this game again at home. Georgia's pass offense is 26th in the country. Gunnar Stockton is averaging 276.5 yards per game. So just south of 300. If that continues for this game against the Crimson Tide, Georgia is winning this game hands down. But this game comes down to winning in the trenches. In 2024, Georgia only had 80 yards on the ground, while Alabama had 177. Jem Miller contributed a lot of yards there for the 177. You also had Jalen Milroe, who's now gone. But for Georgia, they had a terrible time running the ball in 2024. That is somewhat changed. They're getting more focus and pounding out the rock with Nate Frazier, especially there. We'll talk about him in the end of this section. As injuries to bring up, I thought this guy died for the Crimson Tide and was out for the rest of the season. But it looks like Jem Miller is questionable somehow, some way for this game against Georgia. He has a collarbone injury that he's still coming back from, which isn't still a good sign in general, that you're kind of having your hopes on a guy that was injured and relied on him to carry the rock, especially with a collarbone injury. Those are not fun to play with. Defensive tackle Tim Keenum III, he's questionable with an ankle injury. There's actually quite a bit for Alabama. Jamarian Latham, the defensive end, he's questionable, undisclosed injury for him. Losing maybe a little bit of depth there at defensive end if he's not 100%. Also at tight end, Danny Lewis Jr., questionable. Is more of a blocking tight end. And then more unfortunate news there in the trenches for the interior defensive lineman, Jeremiah Beeman. He's going to be out with a lower body injury. And then one more and more depth, unfortunately, looking like it's not going to be 100% for Rock Montgomery. He is a backup there in the interior at guard and center. He's questionable with an undisclosed injury. Just one for the Bulldogs. Right tackle Ernest Green III. We already mentioned him against the Tennessee Volunteers when we did that preview. He is probable with an undisclosed injury. I think there's also a couple other guys on the IR list, but none more important than the guys that we just mentioned. Now, who are we picking? Well, we're going to go Georgia. We're going to go Georgia. We did it last season, I believe, when these two matched up. We got it wrong, but I think this time around we are definitely going to get it right. We think Georgia is going to win by a minimum 6-point difference. They're already sitting at -3 favorites. So I guess that means we think they're going to cover as well. But the big player that's going to have an impact, I think, in this contest is going to be running back for the Georgia Bulldogs, Nate Frazier. The former modern-day Monarch helps in the little things to win this game. Whether it's going to be a third and short or just a short play scenario that the Georgia Bulldogs need to either punch it in, get a first down, or maybe make it third and doable. This guy is going to be very, very impactful. And then I think another thing we need to mention, Georgia has not beaten Alabama since the 2022 National Championship game. So also with that, we think they're going to get their first win since then over the Tide. But before we move on, if you are an Alabama fan or Georgia fan, hit that thumbs up button. Let us know if we're covering the right teams here on the channel. And also let us know who you got and maybe even tell us why. As we're zooming out.